Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Zionist Corner. We're now season 4, episode 5, and I want to extend a very warm welcome to my guest, Yisrael Yaacob ben Avraham, who is the president of JDL 613. Yisrael, welcome, and tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and how you found JDL and what made you interested in Kahana.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So, I actually found the JDL and Meir Kahane through my conversion process. I converted to Judaism. Took a number of years doing that, and yeah, I kind of just started. I was looking for like strong Jews, Jewish warriors, that type of thing on Google, and Meir Kahane popped up, and here comes JDL right behind him, and I was really fascinated from that moment on, and it really like was an important aspect of my conversion, reading all of his books and learning about him and the group and organization and all that stuff, and then actually when actually like right after October 7th, witnessing all these incidents of anti-Semitism, the things happening on college campuses and encampments really got me looking to actually like take part. And I had searched and searched probably for a good month or two for a JDL organization, and didn't really find one. So I eventually got together with a few friends, like a few like-minded Kahanists, and started organizing and just kind of took it from there.
Interesting. So before you started, so you and I, just a little behind the scenes to the audience, Yisrael and I went back and forth about the topic of conversion. It's very controversial amongst a lot of Jews. So before you started practicing the Judean faith, were you more attuned to the fact that Jews come from a strong line of warriors, or were you more familiar with like the Woody Allens and these like more schmucky Jews? That's more of the stereotype, especially in America.
It was more the Woody Allen type, and really, I didn't know anything except for what you see in movies or cartoons. Nothing like bad,
Right.
but just like your stereotypical Jewish guy in the whole outfit, from Jew and
Right.
stuff like that. So,
So outside of the IDF, who are the Jews strapping, the machine guns, it's more, and it's such a good point you bring up because, like I am a genetic Jew. I grew up in America. I'm a first generation American. And yeah, like I grew up like Adam Sandler, funny Jews, Mel Brooks. You see like a lot of weak Jews, like portrayed in media, right? Like the Jew like running away, or during the Holocaust, the way that they teach the Holocaust is horrendous. In America, I'm not sure how your school taught it, but when I was growing up, it was, oh, all Jews were hiding, and nothing wrong with hiding, right? Like we want to survive any way possible. But when I was in school, and my school was 25% Jewish, no one was saying about all the uprisings that were happening against the Nazi. Like I never heard of the Warsaw Uprising, never knew that 90% of the Jewish ghettos during World War II had armed units. Learned about that only a couple of years ago, and I had family who were murdered during the Holocaust, and I also had family who like fought like the Nazis during the Holocaust in the Red Army. So Jews ourselves don't know where we
yeah,
come from, like the strong lineage of warriors.
yeah,
Um,
it's a
mhm.
shame. Like when I really started jumping into my conversion, like I said, the image I had was of this cowering Jew who would run away or just wouldn't stick up for themselves. And a lot of non-Jews have that idea. And I never learned about the uprisings or these strong Jewish warriors who really like fought till the end, gave their all, even with minute weapons. They really didn't have much. They were smuggling in weapons. They had what they had, and they still fought back. And I really think that like that is something that needs to be pushed, especially right now in the with the situation we have. We need to be pushing Jewish warriors, the Maccabees, the ones who revolted during World War II. You name it. We need to be like inspiring our Jewish youth. Like, look at these strong Jews that we have, men and women. Like throughout history, there's so many, too many to even name. And it's shocking that even in like you said, a school that had 20% Jewish students, they didn't even touch on any aspect of that. It's quite shocking, you know what I mean? But that's
Right.
kind of that's a sickness of assimilation, as Meir Kahane would have put it, and that was one of the things he was trying to do with JDL was to you know show the Jewish hero, bring up Jewish strength and push Jewish pride and stuff like that, and it's much needed nowadays for sure, for sure.
Absolutely. So yeah, and that's the thing. Like after the Jewish genocide, October 7th, I call it the Jewish genocide because that's what it was. Sure, non-Jews were also murdered, but they were not hunting for non-Jews. They just were in the wrong time in the wrong place. And so there was a story of a Bedouin. And by the way, for the audience who might not know, the Bedouins in Israel and Jordan, which is 78% of stolen Judean homeland, stolen by Churchill in 1922. So the Bedouins in those areas are actually genetic Jews. They're descended from the warriors who left Judea after both 586 BC and after 136 AD. They left for the Hijaz. It was a huge Judean population. There was so much trade between the Hijaz, which is part of Saudi Arabia eventually, and Israel. It was actually a protectorate of Judea. And so over time, some of them came back home. Obviously, this was after Islam. It was a misnomer that, or misconception that Muhammad killed all the Jews. Basically, the fight between Islam and Jews is a hissy fit. Like a lot of Jew hatred, right? Like if you think about how Christians blame Jews for killing Christ, like technically Jews did not kill Christ. Now, was Jesus as a Jew in the thorn of the Sanhedrin? Absolutely, right? But technically, we gave that off to Pontius Pilate. So same thing with Muhammad. So there was a Judean tribe that was actually working with Muhammad's army to quell the pagan Arabs with whom they actually were fighting. And one of the tribes betrayed Muhammad's army. And so, what Jews label as a genocide, like I'm sure you know the slogan, Khyber, Khyber, Ya Yahud, that a lot of these anti-Semites,
Yeah.
at rallies cry. It's
Yeah.
actually embarrassing because it was not a genocide. It was literally under Judean law how Jews would handle those who betray. And so Muhammad's people literally said, okay, so because you're Jews, you're going to die under the Judean law for traitors. And since then, 1400 years plus, they couldn't get over this, right? Like it's just these old misconceptions. So, to harken back on what you said, that we need to invoke the warrior spirit, right? And what people don't know, even many, many Jews, I would venture to say 95% of Jews that I'm seeing, how do they think that Jews spread out from Judea and Samaria to the rest of Israel? We conquered other tribes, and the focus in the beginning, Jews were not even monotheistic fully until Babylonian exile, which was 586. Jews have been a race and a distinct society for 4,000 years. So, for nearly 2,000 years, it was not a focus to be, well, first of all, there was no rabbinic Judean faith until those exiles. So the focus mainly for the first almost 2,000 years was territorial expansion. And so the Judean warriors were not coming to these villages and saying, like, excuse me, could you leave? We want to take over. They were battling. Now, there were battles that Jews lost, of course, right? That's how we ended up with Jewish slaves, some Jews, not all, in Egypt. Egypt came to conquer Judea and Samaria. Jews was not having any of that. Like, Jews pushed back. So it's clearly stated in steles, like how many Jews were taken from which cities, and Jews did the same. That was part of the ancient world. So it's so important, and like you said, like you're present in the JDL to teach that, to people who join your organization who are complaining about anti-Semitism right now. If you're complaining about it, then be proud of the true warriors from which Jews descend from.
Exactly. And you know what? I look at the IDF like as that, or as part of that lineage of Jewish warriors. Like there are modern like our modern Jewish heroes, and we can really look up to them and say, you know what, like I can be almost just as good. You know what, maybe I can learn some self-defense or just learn how to protect myself, some simple things or whatever. You know what I mean? But um, it's astonishing just how few like Jewish people who were born into this know about like how less or how little they know about their history. You know what I mean? I wasn't taught almost any of that, even in my conversion. I learned it later on, just looking and reading books on Jewish history myself. Do you know what I
Just,
mean? And
just, just like I did, right? And I've been a Jew for 42 years. And
yeah,
what's interesting too, and I think this could have been part of your introduction to the Judean faith through obviously other Jews, there is such a pushback in the community to not appear quote unquote racist, even
yeah,
though there's no such thing as Islamophobia. It was actually a terminology. It was a term created by CARE, which
yeah.
is a pro Islamic terrorist group. Basically, it's a lobbying group here in America. For those who might not know, and so there's such like this fear, right? Like, we can't be racist. We can't see the truth. And so let me tell you this one story, and this will absolutely shock you. So I became a Zionist in 2014. I was actually, for those who might not know, I was an anti-Israel Jew for 20 years because a lot of the Jewish organizations were using anti-Semitic terminology. They were saying Jews and Palestinians, settlements, settlers. Already, like, alarm bells are going off, right? So, like, oh, so Israel is now occupying Palestine. These poor Palestinians. Who are these settlers that are pushing these poor Palestinians off their land, and on and on and on and lies, where Israel was created or founded or even worse, established in 1948. Apparently, Herzl had anything to do with it. He did not. Side note, or the UN, which is even more laughable. So all of this misinformation led me to spread anti-Semitic lies for 20 years. So finally, okay, became a Zionist in 2014. One of my first real Israeli friends was a former IDF soldier who lost an eye because of a Hamas bomb. And we met up in Israel, we're talking finally in person. And I mentioned Rabbi Kahane, just
Interesting.
casually, right? Like, thinking he could add a little bit more insight, just wanted to see his opinion. He was livid. Okay, and this is a former IDF soldier who lost an eye because of terrorists, because of Arab terrorists. Okay,
Yeah.
so he was livid. I come back to America, like, thinking we're still friends. He blocked me and called me a dirty Kahanist. And so this is like my first foray into Zionist, 2014. And I was scared. I was like, oh my gosh, like, what is this Kahana? Like, no, like, I don't want to be associated with it. So from like 2014, almost until honestly, like last year, I did not research Rabbi Kahana. It was such like a like, you obviously know about this, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is insanely liberal,
Yeah.
called him a terrorist and a racist, and a lot of
The
these
ADL,
organizations.
sorry to interrupt. The ADL loves to call us thugs and hooligans, even still to this day. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, especially after the Jewish genocide, right? So that's the thing. So you have the ADL. Thank you for mentioning that. A lot of other organizations fall into that same line. And again, to be forthright, it wasn't until the Jewish genocide my Chabad rabbi started sending me videos of Kahana and also of the Rebbe and how Zionist he was and how everything I was saying as a solution, basically the Rebbe had said back in the day. And so my rabbi was sending me these Kahana videos. And everything Kahana was saying in the 70s, late 60s, uh, and up until he was murdered, is absolutely the historically correct solution.
100%.
And
It's astonishing how correct he was. I mean, just 100% spot on. I mean, I watched the videos myself and I'm just like, wow, he really called it out back in the 90s, back in the 70s, what was going to happen around now. You know what I mean? It's a little interesting to like that you brought that story up. I've had similar experiences when because I have a lot of non-Jewish family, non-Jewish friends and stuff, and so they had no idea about Meir Kahane or JDL or anything. So when some of them found out I was joining JDL or doing this, they searched it up, and of course, when you Google JDL or Meir Kahane, you see all the CARE and ADL propaganda calling it, calling him a terrorist, calling the group terrorist group, calling us extremists. And, like you spoke about that fear to even look into it. I've seen a lot of people just, they have no idea because they just took, oh, he's a terrorist. Oh, I heard he's a terrorist. Well, I'm never going to look into it. When they really could have just dug a little bit beyond the surface and found this amazing, massive amount of history and Torah learning and just you name it, And but I had those friends that I was just mentioning. They they were like so scared. They stopped talking to me at one point. Then the one hit me up and said, "I want to sit down and have a talk with your family so they know what you're doing." I'm like, my family knows what I'm doing, and they actually, my non-Jewish family agrees. They say Meir Kahane is common sense. When I tell them something Meir Kahane said, or they hear something in the background, they're like, "Why do people hate that? That's totally common sense thing to do." You know what I mean? Like to defend yourself. Why is that so horrible? But that it happens a lot in Israel because of the lies and the propaganda that's been spread, and
and it's taught in their schools. I was asking my Israeli friends, I said, what history are they teaching in these middle schools and high schools? And that's the problem. They teach a lot about biblical history, which, look, I respect profoundly. I think the faith is part of the Judean culture. But our Judean ancestors, for those who are genetic Jews, the ancestors were able to decipher between biblical stories and
yeah,
actual history. And somewhere along the line in the past couple hundred years, where I think rabbis took a more overbearing approach, there was a blur in the line, right? So a lot of my friends who are observant, they treat a lot of, and there are some biblical stories that are rooted in actual history, of course. King
sure.
David existed, the Maccabees existed, King Solomon existed, King Saul existed, but there are a lot of, like it's also meant to be a lesson and ethics and morals. And so there are so many people I know who are observant Jews, they don't know our actual history, right? Like, so they say, like, okay, well, Jews came to Israel. And so, like, you're then lying to other people, like, oh, so the anti-Semites, their antennas perk up. Oh, so Jews are invaders, right? Like, Jews are not indigenous. Like, we're not using those words. Or we're not explaining about Hanukkah, like the oil part and the miracle of lights that was added 100, 200 years later. No one is talking about it was the greatest Zionist military
Exactly.
victory
Yeah.
of all times. So let's rewind a little bit, especially for our audience. And again, like I didn't know any of this until like about a year ago. The history of the JDL and what prompted Rabbi Kahane, who I don't, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here. I did some obviously research
Yeah.
on this, but not in depth. I wanted you to fill in the blanks. When he started the JDL, this was 1968, correct?
Yeah.
And
Correct. And he
mhm,
he was receiving. So at the time he was, or right before that, he was working for the Jewish press, and he
right.
started
And that's
an immense amount of letters about Jews being attacked. They couldn't walk to shul. Like in New York at that, like, especially at that time, there was a lot of like racial tension going on. The Black Panthers were doing their thing. There was a lot of stuff going on in New York City, and he was getting all these letters, and he was really concerned. Didn't see anybody standing up. So yeah, you
and
know,
there was actually one pivotal point to that, right? And that was the school strike
yes,
happened,
yep,
right?
yep,
So I believe it was before 1968, right? It was
I think
there was black Jewish tensions around a school strike. I
yeah,
forgot the name of it. If you could oh, I remember now. It's the Ocean Hill Brownsville school
okay,
strike. And
yep,
so the black parents were really spreading anti-Semitic lies. The Black Panthers got involved and it escalated to what we would call a mini pogrom.
yeah.
It was the precursor to the Crown Heights riots.
Yeah, exactly. And you
Right,
know
right
what?
there.
I'm hearing stories nowadays in New York City schools. We're almost getting to that point of having another similar incident, just the different people. You know what I mean? And it's really sad that this is back in 1968,
Mhm.
1969 maybe, and now we're replaying something or almost replaying something similar. I hear
Right.
stories all the time of teachers really struggling, not as bad, but comments, not getting promotions, all kinds of stuff. Do you know what I mean? So, like Mayor Kahane really did. They did a lot of stuff for like during that period. They organized patrols. They were walking teachers home from school and to work, walking teachers to shul. They even organized a demonstration at the Panthers headquarters in Harlem. And they really did a lot for that, like for those teachers. I mean, there was a lot of things going on at that time, like I said, racial tensions and stuff, and the Black Panthers were just kind of feeding into it. They were talking on the radio shows and calling Jews all kinds of like anti-Semitic names, and it was pretty vile from what I've seen on the internet. You know what I mean, in videos and things like
Yeah.
that.
And that's the thing. It just okay. So like, if these were white Nazis, neo-Nazis that were doing that, that would be completely abominable, like to both Jews and non-Jews. But because they were black, like suddenly pushing back on that, which is the same neo-Nazi behavior, that's seen
Yeah,
as racist. But Mayor Kahane, again, you can add a little bit more if you'd like. He seemed to be a jack of all trades, right? Like he was a writer for the Jewish press. He was a writer for or he was a journalist, right? He was covering the Yankees as a reporter, which I did not know about before. And he also, by the way, and this is completely erased in most of this back and forth about Kahana, is that he was one of the most vocal proponents to free Soviet Jewry, of which my
yes,
family was a victim. Like, my family came to America in 1979. So until I did my research about Mayor Kahane about a year ago, I did not know any of that. Like again, like to me, he was a scary terrorist. He wanted to kill all the Arabs, and we'll course correct how that was not true later on in the conversation. But yeah, I didn't know like how diverse his interests truly were before GDL.
yeah. Well, I mean, he before JDL, he was ordained a rabbi at Meir Yeshiva in Brooklyn in 1956. He went, he was a Torah scholar, fierce advocate for Jewish survival. He studied law, he studied political science, he studied international relations. I mean, the guy, like you said, he was a jack of all trades, and you could really see that in his writing and stuff. I mean, it's amazing. And then you bring up, his fighting for the Soviet Jews. Like Kahana didn't start that fight, but he brought it to the front page. You know what I mean? Like the things that him and JDL were doing were like, he didn't invent those tactics, but everybody, like Jews weren't using those tactics. You know what I'm saying? He always used to say, it's okay when this group does it. It's okay when this group does it. But when a Jew stands up to fight, you know what I mean? Fight back and stand up, against the Soviet Union, so all of a sudden everybody's got an issue and it's a problem. You know what I mean? Apparently, he was even called by a member of the UN and told, "Look, you need to stop. You're causing issues for Jews," and he refused to stop because he really believed in it. And I talked to a lot of Russian Jews now who came, back or came here during that time or moved to Israel. They love him, even still to this
Oh
day.
yeah, they're all Kahanists.
When I get stopped in Brooklyn and in Coney Island and Brighton Beach, oh, they want to talk me up and tell me all kinds of stories. It's amazing. They still love him to this day, and he really did fight for them. You know what I mean? And it was one of the things that really put JDL like on the map,
Mhm.
and vice versa. He put the issue on the map and brought it to the front page.
And so, what was the impetus for GDL to start? Was it that school strike, which obviously led to the rise of Black Panthers against Jews, or was it an amalgam of like what exactly would
I think
you?
it was actually the letters is what like actually gave him the idea. And then getting all these letters, like I said, like when he was working for the Jewish press, he'd get letters to the editor or just personal letters of different attacks going on, or this happened here in this city, in Cleveland and L.A. And you know what I mean. So and he's just like nobody was doing anything, nobody was
Right.
speaking out. The Jewish establishment, too, just like today, too afraid to rock the boat, too
Mhm.
afraid to talk the truth, say the
Oh
real.
yeah. It was liberals. It was liberals for over a century for Jews here. I mean, look at how many Jews were supporting FDR, and he was very anti-Semitic. And to this day, you still find Jews who will defend him and say, like, "Oh, like my parents voted for FDR, and that made me a lifelong Democrat." Like, not even looking at the treatment of Jews that these
Yeah.
politicians um, evoke and carry out. So, and that's the thing too. Like, mhm. Go
We
ahead.
still have it going on today with New York
Oh
with
yeah.
Mom Donnie. 20% of Jews voted for him. I mean, that's astonishing. The guy is obviously an anti-Semite. I'll say he is. I mean, come on.
I mean, unfortunately, it's not astonishing. I just wrote an article, what made me an anti-Israel Jew for 20 years, or what kept me anti-Israel for 20 years. And it's sad, but it's very logical for those who follow the lies and don't even know that they're being lied to. Like, so for example, a lot of Jews here think that Judaism is a religion, and since they're not observant, then they're not Jewish because, oh, like I'm not religious. So and then they falsely call themselves European, those who, let's say, whose family spent the diaspora in Europe, not understanding that nothing wrong with being white, but white is a separate race, like literally means Anglo-Saxon. Jews are not racially white. And so they don't have that ethnic connection. So that's number one. Number two is that, by the way, a lot of the Mamdani Jews, that the terrorist Jews, went to Jewish day schools. That's something that the Jewish press is not talking about. And why? I'll give another example. I reconnected with a high school classmate at a Chabad event, a really fun cooking event by this influencer Ruhama. Follow her. She makes really delicious Mizrahi dishes. Just a little plug for her. Anyway, so I'm at this Chabad event in New Jersey, and out of the corner of my eye, I'm like, wait, Tamar, I remember you from high school. So we embrace. We're catching up before the event. She's a teacher at Solomon Schechter Day School, one of the most famous Jewish day schools that probably even non-Jews have heard of. Within 5 minutes, she's telling me about one of her family members that moved to another city in Judea and Samaria. You and I understand what that means, right? Because we're smart. We're not contributing to anti-Semitism. I'm not anymore. This woman, who again was my high school friend, she's a teacher, something to grasp onto, in the span of a couple of minutes, said Green Line, West Bank, settlements, and settlers. Casually, oh, like one of my cousins is kind of weird. He just moved to this settlement in the West Bank. It's behind the Green Line. I don't know what's wrong with him. Blah, 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 right? Like it's rolling off of her tongue. It took my all because like I wanted to push back on her. But A, I didn't have time. But B, like I'm in front of the Rebbetzin and I didn't want to cause a whole scene, even though my Rebbetzin knows what I do. And that's it. And so just imagine she's teaching hundreds of students throughout her career, and that's multiplied, but by all the other teachers at Solomon Schechter and Frisch and all the other ones I don't even know about. And then this is also repeated in Hebrew schools. And I know because Hebrew schools are also turning out Jews who hate Israel because they're being taught like, oh, the Jews and the Palestinians. Again, that's how I was anti-Israel. So it actually makes sense why we have Mamdani Jewish terrorists. It's horrible, but it's like once like the root of the problem here. And so yeah, and so they also, they also invoke, oh, you just don't want to vote for Mamdani or AOC or Schumer or name your libtarded, politician because you're Islamophobic, not knowing what that actually is. Like I'm sure you don't fear Muslims because they are Muslims. We just want to be safe, right? Like in our communities and make sure that we don't have Sharia law, make sure that Jews are not targeted, not assaulted, that we have a right of self-defense. So that also goes into Judean values. And again, that's not being taught, so the values that Jews are taught, and this is across the board, not just in more liberal schools, is tikkun olam. It's like the bastardization of tikkun olam, right? Like, oh, we're the light onto the world. We have to help everyone. We're the ones who that's not what tikkun olam originally meant, right? Like, first of all, it was about upkeeping the Judean faith's own inner light, nothing to do with betraying who you are and going to be these social workers of the world. That's not at all what it meant. And these people, kids who turn into adults, turn into policymakers, are not being taught that, again, Jews come from a warrior stock, right? Like you mentioned, like, we thousands of years held off so many warriors. We conquered different tribes. Think about who lives in Lebanon, not the Arab conquerors, but the more indigenous tribes in Lebanon. Those were tribes living in Canaan, right? However you pronounce it, that Jews literally pushed north.
Exactly.
Said like, no thanks. Like, this is my land now. Gaza, right? How did Jews gain Gaza? It wasn't, again, through asking. It wasn't like, hi, Philistines, can I have, like, the land that you're now living on? No, the Philistines were a Greek Cretan seafaring group. They settled in now Gaza. Jews were expanding west. They saw an obstacle to their objective, and they were battling the Philistines. And so the Maccabees, pushed back on them finally in 145 BC. There was back and forth with the Romans. And then in 100 BC, the Hasmonean dynasty even retained Queen Cleopatra III to help win battles against her own son, Ptolemy IX, who was defending the Philistines. And Queen Cleopatra III, she was a very shrewd woman. She said, okay, I'll help. She sent in her top two generals. And guess who they were?
Yes.
They were Jews. Her top two generals were Jews. So they joined forces with the Judean warriors who were living in Judea, and they kicked the ass out of the Philistines. And so that's it. From 145 BC, Gaza has been Judean land and still is legally. Article 80 of the UN. People can look that up. So how did Jews get south to the Negev? Pushed out other tribes. How did Jews expand east to the eastern stretches of what is now renamed Jordan? Kicked out the Moabites. They have Moabite steles that literally describe the intense attacks by the Judean warriors. And if you look at the Torah, again, good for the audience to know, one of the Judean values is rise and kill first. Now, doesn't mean go out and murder people, wantonly, does not mean that. But it means as soon as you feel threatened, or someone in your family feels threatened, someone in your community, or if there's legitimate reason, defend yourself, go after your enemies, and do not hesitate.
Exactly. So like we the revived JDL 613 Brotherhood, we keep this concept, but we must use it in a smart way. Like, we live in a modern world. We live in a post world, and you know what I mean. Like, we're not talking about going out and killing. We're looking at it as action. Like, if someone comes and is threatening your community, go out and try and speak out, stand up, do something. It can have multiple interpretations, not just the sharp way it sounds. You know what I mean? And like concepts like that should be really taught. Like we were talking about how these students aren't taught about the Jewish warriors and stuff, and it's just really.
Or just interject, or even Israel, because as much as I go after Bibi, I think he's a weak leader, all the stuff. I'm sure you've read my writings on that, looked at my newsletters, but I give so much credit, and not to Bibi, but to the Mossad, to the IAF, for what they accomplished with Operation Rising Lion. So that's a perfect example of a Judean value that was utilized in today's terms, right? So you have Iran, genocidal against Jews, and America also. By the way, Iran killed, just for the Americans who are tuning in, who might have been on the fence about the attack on the nuclear facilities and getting Americans involved. Not so fun fact, Iran killed more Americans than Israelis. Thousands of American troops were killed.
I heard about it on the internet, Telegram and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And it's sad that we can't even talk about the deaths of our own military or our own people here. They didn't even talk about the hostages who were taken, who were American.
Who are American, right? American citizens. But that's the thing. So Yeah, so Iran killed more Americans than Jews, but obviously it's closer to proximity to Israel. So Israel acted, and it acted in a very violent way, like with those obviously strikes that it was nonstop, unrelenting, right? Like the way that Israel, literally the IAF, they're absolute heroes, and the Mossad agents made this all possible. The way that IAF, I don't know how, maybe you were the same as me. I was looking at the strikes on Iran with such pride. I was like, yes, finally, finally, after the Hezbollah, after the Houthis, after Hamas, and all the financing and the terror tentacles, Israel is truly fighting back. And I had never been so proud to be a Judean as I was watching this for 2 weeks until unfortunately Trump put a stop to it, right? Like we can talk about the policies another time. But that's the thing too. And you mentioned violence, right? So of course, like I don't advocate random Jews, like killing anyone in the streets of New York, but it's also important in context to understand why GDL in the 60s and the 70s did enact, this is something we can't hide from, did enact in violence and violent attacks because no one was protecting the Jewish community. Like you said, like where were the police? Right.
Exactly, nowhere.
The Shomrim, which luckily Jews in Brooklyn now have, were not the Shomrim of today, not as strong, not uh as numerous, right? Like as we have. And it was this isolation. It's kind of like the Jews of Judea and Samaria, who for decades were getting attacked by these Arab occupiers, and no one was caring, not the Jews in other parts of Israel, not the Israeli government, certainly not the Israeli liberal Supreme Court. So here's these Jews. And so, like you said, like they were writing letters, desperate, right? Like, oh, I don't feel safe walking down the street. I'm getting discriminated at work. I'm getting attacked, right? Like how many, even before the Jewish genocide, I remember I've been in New York for 20 years. In 2019, Jews, like I would, every time I turn on the local news,
Yeah,
another Jew in Brooklyn was getting stabbed.
yeah.
And
Or
they
pawn
were, mhm.
for the knockout game when that was going on.
Right, right. And
It's
that's the thing.
never.
And they were getting sent to jail for less than 24 hours, just like today,
Yeah,
getting out and then attacking more and more Jews. And
yeah,
again, because the attackers were Black and brown, there were Hispanics and Black people, no one cared. But I remember, and this is quite interesting, a couple of years ago, a white neo-Nazi walked into a Soho bar and had a swastika on his armband. Oh my gosh, it was like the end of the world because some white dude walked in with a swastika band. Like
yeah.
it was like as if he killed millions of people. But no one cared when the Black and brown, like New Yorkers were killing or were stabbing Jews left and right. And that this has been ongoing. So he decided, why the only thing that will make our enemies stop is if we use violence to finally maybe scare them. That's what actually worked.
Yeah.
Nothing,
So
nothing else is stopping them.
Mayor Kahane used to say that violence is horrible,
Mm,
horrible. Sometimes it's horribly necessary.
exactly.
Sometimes
Yeah.
it is. And now we look at that. You got to defend yourself. All it will take, I believe, all it will take is a few Orthodox Jews. They seem to be like attacked a lot because they're outwardly Jewish, guy or whatever. Let one or two of those guys fight back, stand up for themselves. People are going to start thinking like, oh, maybe I shouldn't attack that guy. He might have a firearm. He might know Krav Maga or like know how to defend himself. It's really only going to take a few for things to actually change. But we got to like really inspire Jews now to believe that you know what, like, doesn't matter your body size, your age. We all got the Jewish power, the Jewish strength in us, like this inherently in us. You know what I mean? And um, back to that quote, like sometimes violence is necessary. Sad but true. You know what I mean?
And I personally don't think it's sad. I think that, like, look, like if they're like, I'll give an example too. And this is, well, like violence was used, and it's not comparable exactly, but just a bit of a historical context. I was in New Mexico with a non-Jewish friend, and because like I'm part of an indigenous group, I love learning about other indigenous tribes. I grew up in New Jersey. We knew about the Lenape tribe that inhabited New Jersey, but not much else, right? Like in a lot of history that's taught in public schools is skewed. Like the way we even learn about slavery was Not actually accurate, right?
You get the surface and that's it. Yeah.
Exactly right. So I'm in New Mexico. I really want to learn about the cultures, and I asked my friend who has Native American friends also, and she's Catholic, she's Brazilian, and she's going on and on how all the Native Americans are Catholic in New Mexico for the most part. And I was shocked. And I said, what do you mean they're all Catholic? What about retaining, their identity? Like, there's 500 tribes still, still there. And she's like, yeah, they've all been assimilated. So that's the thing. So like if Jews didn't fight back, if Jews wanted to be seen as, and a lot of Jews are, unfortunately, as, peace-loving people, that's how you get killed and your identity gets erased.
We'll get walked all over. I mean,
Right.
it's just how it happens in history. Just
Well, and look what happened to the Jewish genocide. Like, okay, like we can take two different sides. We kind of have the Egypt under Sisi, who's my hero. I love him. I was in Egypt. Yes, I'm a Jew who loves an Arab leader. I was in Egypt in 2022, and I saw how safe it is. There are military checkpoints everywhere. Like in one city, there's two major checkpoints. In one day, we were traveling from Cairo maybe 3 hours south, we went through 10 checkpoints. Annoying, of course, but no one apologizes for it. In Israel, you have military checkpoints in Judea and Samaria, which, by the way, Jews have to go through also every single day. And it's an outcry. Oh my gosh, like you're making Arabs go through. Guess what? Arabs in Egypt are going through checkpoints every day. I was in Jordan. Arabs in Jordan go through checkpoints. Uh, Look at the insane military in Saudi Arabia and Dubai. Like I've been there too. No one complains. But
yeah.
oh no, like Jews want to make sure that the terrorists are not carrying in like, knives and guns, and it's the end of the world. And then Jews, a lot of them are aiding in this erasure of Jews, into the murder of Jews. Like so another example, I was in Israel 7 times. The last one was in 2023, a week before the genocide happened. But the trip before that was 2022, and it was an organized trip. And so our tour went to the Eris crossing, which was a thing, but before the war, something like 40,000, 60,000, between 40 and 60,000 Arabs who were living in Gaza were going back and forth because they had work permits. So we go to this terminal. It's gorgeous. It was gorgeous, by the way. Like it's not like what they portray in the media. It was
Yeah.
air conditioned. It had plants. It was massive. And so the Jewish director was lamenting how more of the Arab occupiers in Gaza need permits. He was pushing the government for 100,000 permits. And the people on my tour, all Jews, were just clapping, yes, 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 more permits. I'm the only one who is not clapping. I'm like, are these people insane? Like, why would you want more of our enemies
Well,
inside?
I think where that comes from is a lot of people, non-Jews and Jews, think the majority of the world has Western morals and values like we do. And you know what? Until you really I mean, if you're in this American bubble, you might never realize that. But if you really learn a little bit about what goes on outside our world, you realize that no way you can't use we can't use our Western thoughts here or Western tactics usually to deal with them. I mean, we can't because they're not working within the same set of rules that we are. You know what I mean?
And that's the thing too, is that a lot of people label Israel and Jews as Westerners. They're not.
Yeah,
And so it's forgetting, a lot of modern Jews now, or Jews today, are forgetting the Middle Eastern roots from where
yeah,
they actually come from. And so, like, there's this whole controversy, or like a push and pull between the Mizrahi Jews in Israel and the Ashkenazim. And, like, especially after the genocide, and Mizrahi are saying no Ashkenaz Jew should ever be prime minister because they're not understanding the Arab mindset. We lived
yeah,
amongst the Arab occupiers. We lived under Dimitude. We lived under, Jews actually in Palestine, when Israel was called Palestine, or the colonizer term for Israel, were not harmed by Muslim occupiers. Sure, there were onerous taxes under the under the Ottomans for 400 years, but no Muslim ruler massacred Jews. In fact, there were Muslim rulers who came in and helped Jews when the Druze were massacring Jews. And they're like, no, 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 you need to put a stop on this. And then, they dispersed the Druze, they kicked out the Jews for, for a couple of years in the territory for everyone to calm down. So it was only when the British occupiers came in and they were fomenting all of the Arab riots and massacres. So being a Jew in Palestine was not completely. It was more safe between the Crusades and the British occupier times. But
Yeah.
Jews who lived under Muslim rule in the diaspora, they were being massacred. For the many, oftentimes, demitude was a lot more onerous for them. I hear stories all the time, from my friends. For example, Persia, people say like, oh, we just need to get rid of the Ayatollah and Iran will go back to being pro-Jewish and pro-Israel. That's not true. Even under the times of the Shah and before, Jews were being discriminated in Iran as soon as Islam came in. Before Islam, when Iran was Zoroastrian for close to 1,000 years, Jews lived very peacefully there, just like Jews lived very peacefully all over North Africa before Islam came in. So it's not Arabs that are the problem, it's Islam. Because Jews had a great time.
Islam inherently hates Jews. I mean, it says it in their Quran. It says it.
Right. Right.
I don't know much, but I know what I know isn't great for Jews. Do you know what I mean? And for people to not know any aspect of that sometimes is astonishing. Not surprising because they don't teach any of it. And people don't want to delve in. They don't want to know the truth about Meir Kahane. They're not going to even look into what Islam actually says about Jewish people or non-Jews. You know what I mean? But to even believe that you could make peace with Palestinians or make peace with Iran.
The Arab occupiers. Remember, Jews are Palestinians. Yeah.
Yeah. But to make peace with any of these people, come on. It's never going to happen. We're going to have the same cycle over and over again. And it's really a sickness, of assimilation away from this Middle Eastern, or, remembering that Jews are Middle Eastern. They're,
Absolutely.
That's from, you know what I mean? Where like you brought up, yes, there are Ashkenazi Jews, but they moved up there. They left, they left Israel and went up there when they were kicked out. You know what I'm saying? They weren't actually Europeans. They were eventually,
right. Well, actually, let me add for the audience, because I know I explained this to you. So let me add to the audience. So how are Ashkenaz genetic Jews? Because there's so much misinformation about that. And a lot of it has been debunked. There's the anti-Semitic lie about Khazars. The Khazars converted to, that's not true. So the Khazars actually were Christians who all converted to Islam. They had great relationship with Jews. They respected Jews, but none of them became Jews. Then the other theory, which has been debunked, is that Ashkenazim started with 300 Jewish women and they intermarried with non-Jews. That's also been debunked. So how it actually happened, you had Sephardic Jews in Italy, Spain, and Portugal. So there were expulsions. And when the Jews were moving east, some of them kept moving east. It was those Jews, and there was a 200 or a couple hundred year bottleneck period in different cities in Italy, Lucca, Italy being one of them. So then Jews were moving even east from there to the Ashkenaz region. So altogether, in those beginning stages of movement, it was 20,000 Italian Sephardic Jews who ended up in the Ashkenaz region. So all Ashkenaz genetic Jews descend from them. And that's why, when I do a DNA test, I did 3 and it comes back 100% Jew. And I break down the filter, it's 92% Ashkenaz, 6% Iberian Jew, and 2% Italian. That completely is a story of how the Ashkenaz Jews are tied to Israel. Completely. Because in Italy, it was a big mishmash of Jews. You had Jews who were taken to Italy by Roman soldiers, right? After the exiles, after each of the Jewish Roman wars, there were 3 of them. But then there were other Jews who came to Italy from Spain, from Portugal. And then something else many people don't know, Jews and non-Jews, there were Jews living in Italy in all of the Roman Empire before there were any issues between the Romans and Jews. King Solomon sent a lot of Jews out into the world to be traders, to bring back business back to Israel. So, and interestingly enough, the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, a lot of a lot of the Roman generals were actually Jews who destroyed Jerusalem. I mean, it's sad, but like, they were part of the Roman Empire and they were part of society. And by the way, there were a lot of warriors in the Roman army who were Jews. And that just ties what Kahane was saying, that we are rooted in this warrior class. And that was proven all throughout history, of course. So I wanted to ask, because I want to be filled in a little bit. Okay, so Kahane starts JDL 68. What made him move to Israel? And then in Israel, I was watching, or from his time in Israel, I was watching videos where he said the Israeli government sent me in to these Arab towns, to quell violence and, counter terrorism. And he said, but the Arabs respected me. And all I needed to quash the violence was them hearing my name, that I was coming, and I came to the town or to the village, and there was no more violence against Jews. So if you could help me and the audience fill in a little bit of those gaps.
So, from what I've been told, like he ended up moving to Israel. JDL existed after that. It was he moved away from it. He eventually, came back and kind of took over eventually while still living in Israel. Was kind of doing both, but I think he's seen it as a more of a more pressing issue to go to Israel and push, true toward Judaism and
Mhm.
not mismatch of Western democracy and this and that. He always, one of the big things that he pushed the whole time was Aliyah. Every Jew go to Israel. Every Jew go to Israel. And one of the things he said right before he left is, I can't keep promoting Aliyah without making Aliyah. And
Mhm.
that's right before he had his kids. His kids were born there and stuff like that as well. I'm sure that had a part of it, wanting to have a family there and all that.
May I just ask, I'm so sorry, may I just ask one question? Before he left for Israel, was
Yes.
JDL already branched out in different cities, or was it still just in
Oh,
New
yeah.
York?
Well, at one point they had 15,000 members
Oh,
for
wow.
just, yeah, yeah. All over. I mean, I'm constantly like Googling, just looking into old newspapers and old digital archives everywhere. Cleveland, New York, LA, Arizona, Texas, Florida, like you
Wow.
name it, just all over. So yeah, they were huge, huge. But going back to the Israel thing, like he just seen like a lot of pressing issues in Israel and thought he could do a lot. That's where he started his shul or his yeshiva, the yeshiva of the Jewish idea in Jerusalem and stuff like that, which was around for a number of years. And they started different communities, Kafar Puach, I think it's called. They call it the Apple. I still know some people who live there, old school Kahanas and stuff. And yeah, he did a lot of stuff when he was there. I mean, he got into the political activism. He ran for Knesset. He won eventually. Eventually, then they banned. Actually, most people don't know this, but Netanyahu's party, the Likud, are the ones who banned them.
Was it because of competition, like they felt threatened, or was it
That's
for some bullshit like
what
actual
from
right?
what Meir Kahane says, and from what the like little bit I can piece together through like statistics and stuff from that time, is like he was going to get multiple seats and they really were afraid of him and his party, and they knew that like he had the youth of Israel, like the youth of Israel. He had IDF believed in what he was teaching and all that stuff, and they were afraid of him. They were absolutely afraid of him. It's just like here, the Jewish establishment just replaced there, you know what I mean, afraid to rock the boat. Or
Just before I lose my thought, would you compare, again, this is off the cuff here, would you compare him maybe, I mean, obviously different tactics and everything. The only person I can compare him to contemporary, a Ben Gavir,
yeah,
in terms of more the youth vote, more,
yeah, I mean there is like a lot. I mean, I guess, yeah, yeah. Really, well, actually, really, I would say nobody really compares to Khan. At
right,
least,
right. That's true. That's true.
Nobody can hold up to it.
Yeah.
Actually, I see a lot of similarities in Trump, believe it or not.
Mhm.
Not the ideology, none of that stuff. But what I see is Mayor Kahane pushed the truth. I believe I'm a Trump fan, Trump voter. I believe, and you
I'm the
kind of
same.
see similar things, except for the big difference is Mayor Kahane was murdered in the end. They didn't succeed with Trump. You see a lot of this like fake news using propaganda against JDL and calling him, calling Mayor Kahane extremist, terrorist, racist, all this stuff. Um, and the left used the similar tactics against Trump. You know what I mean? And I see a lot of the same stuff. And then you could extrapolate that to Ben Gvir. Nowadays, they do the same thing to Ben Gvir, the
And
same
by the
exact thing.
way, yeah, and by the way, it was Netanyahu who was chastising Ben Gvir for going up to the Temple Mount. I'm like, well, first of all, that's part of his job is to ascertain security issues on the Temple Mount. But second of all, you are sending a message to the world that Jews have no place on the Temple Mount and that the Jordanian Waqf can walk all over Israel. And by the way, it's not just isolated to Israel. I have now been exposed to a lot of Hindu history that's not taught in the US. And I really feel like Jews need to be more attuned to Hindu history for the reason they've been battling Islam for far longer than Jews have.
Yeah,
Because 800, this is absolutely sobering statistic. 400 million, just absorb that number. Like you cannot, right? 400
yeah.
million Hindus were murdered by Muslims in India over 800 years.
Wow.
It's a statistic that goes beyond comprehension.
Gives you chills, that number. You know what I
Right.
mean? But bringing up Hindus, we were trying to make connections and inroads with the Hindu community. Um, they deal with the similar issues
Yeah.
against Islam. In England, they have to deal with the grooming gangs. Not
Right.
so much here, at least as far as I know. Who knows what's going on? But so we're trying to make inroads with them. They have similar ideas about defense and pride and stuff like that. And why not work with some groups who have background and dealing with similar things and stuff like that. And they're a fantastic community, as far as I know. You know what I mean?
Well,
And as
yeah.
what I hear, Jews in India have always been fine. I mean,
Mhm.
as much as I don't know much of the history, but the little bit I do know is they've always been respected, or never
Absolutely. Yeah.
nothing in Arab countries. You know what I mean? So
Oh, the story of the Indian Jews is fascinating. So we have the Cochin Jews. I actually have a podcast episode on a Cochin Jew, and yeah, so they were obviously Judean. They came to the forgot the coast, Marbury coast. It was a coastal town, and they came as traders during King Solomon times, and they did not assimilate. Like there's this misnomer, like, oh, how come Jews in Europe look white and Jews in India look Indian? Intermarriage, that's not true. There's this actual phenomenon. I didn't know this scientifically. If you live in an environment over a period of time, like thousands of years, you do take on some of the features of or your skin gets lighter. Like how come if you move to Israel, like I know a lot of people who move to Israel and they move there with lighter skin and skin tone is not a race. Their children are literally born 5 shades tanner because they're always in the sun, right? It's not like here in the States. And by the way, even here in the States, depends where you live, right? Like I live in New York, so we have winter here, right? We have rainy fall season. If you live in Arizona, like my friends in Arizona are perpetually tan, and not just because
exactly.
of,
Yeah.
not just because of tanning salons. Like they're really outside every single day and all the sunshine. So he explained to me, he's like, no, we're Judean. So that's one group. Then you had the Baghdadi Jews who came from Iraq. Then you had Sephardic Jews who were coming into India. They were interacting with the Baghdadi Jews. And then you had a splinter group, the B'nai Israel Jews, who are also genetic Jews. They just happen to live in another location. And he said exactly what you said. He said, we never had problems with Hindus, only
Yeah.
with Muslims. He said only the Muslims were attacking, but not just the Jews, but more so the Hindus. So to tie it back to what I was talking about the Jordanian Waqf that controls the Temple Mount, the Hindus deal with Muslim Waqfs who control properties up in India also. And my Hindu friends say that it's so sad that just like Jews have self-hating Jews amongst your population, like one of my friends said, Hindus and Jews are the only two people that have self-hatred amongst them. She said there's so many Hindus who are voting for Muslim parties in India who are voting against their interests, just like it's happening like here amongst the liberal party. And that's, like I'm a Republican, and every time I go to my Republican club, I get the same questions. Why are Jews Democrats? It makes no sense.
I get the same questions all the
Yeah.
time, and I'm like, I can't answer it for you besides assimilation and brainwashing. You know what I mean? Look,
And
I'll give it to these groups. They're good at propaganda.
oh, of
They
course. Right.
they do an amazing job at brainwashing the youth and college kids into believing all this madness. Now, I will say, maybe when I was like in my early 20s, I forget what was going on at the time, but I had seen some videos on like YouTube and stuff like that about Israel and the Palestinians and stuff. And I
Arab
just
occupiers.
That's right. That's right. The Arab occupiers. It worked on me before I even knew anything about Judaism. And I was like, I feel bad for them. You know what? Those guys are bad. Now, I didn't do anything I wasn't political or anything. I didn't really take it any further than watching the one video and having that one emotion. But you can see just there, it even worked on me for a little while when I was non-political and wasn't
Oh,
really
it
a
worked.
Jew.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, like it worked on me, and I'm a Jew. Like I should know better, and that's what these Jewish organizations are sharing through. And it's not like, and I'll say this, it's not like the Jewish presidents of organizations are waking up every day thinking, how do I screw over Israel today? How do I contribute to anti-Semitism? No, they actually have good intentions, but because they don't know their own history, because they also were taught about using anti-Semitic terminology, this is how it multiplies. I'll give a great example. I am also an op-ed writer. I've been published over 50 times, Jewish publications, non-Jewish publications. Guess who gives me the least trouble? Non-Jewish publications. They're not changing Judea and Samaria back to West Bank. They're not lying about that. Okay, here, I'll give an example. And I've called them out, so I have no problem. We're a very honest podcast, non-PC. I wrote for JNS, which is a major, major publication in the Jewish world. I believe it's called the Jewish News Syndicate. And this is not Lashon Hora. I've talked to the editor about this. I've confronted him. So I submit this article. It's top notch. And in it, I stated a fact that there was open immigration for Jews back to Israel under the Ottoman times until 1882, when the Ottomans stopped all Jewish immigration, and then instead they encouraged Arab occupiers to come in. That's irrefutable facts. The editor comes back to me, emails me back, and says, I can't publish this piece because it's not true what you said. No such thing happened in 1882. And I said, yes, it did. And like I gave him the sources and he sourced everything. And he says to me, well, I wasn't taught that in school. You're in your 70s. There are a lot of things people are not taught in school. Or how many times did I submit pieces to Jewish publications where I'm putting Judea and Samaria, I'm putting Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria. I get back West Bank, this is this. I'm like, you're helping. You're
Yeah.
helping the lies. So,
You know, the,
yeah.
they. I once heard a quote that Jewish education is a mile wide but only an inch deep,
Oh, yeah.
and that proves it right there. That's been that way for a long time. They don't teach anybody anything really but the surface. None of this real great like that. This is one of the things that I really fell in love with Judaism and the Jewish people was the history. This
Mhm.
wide breadth of history, all these books that you can learn from, just never ending learning. I've been at this for over 10 years and there's so much more to learn. You can learn for your lifetime and still not have learned maybe 2% of
Oh, yeah.
everything. And
Oh, yeah.
I'm,
The rabbis who said, like, I knew the rabbi for
like,
all
I'm surprised that
information.
these people don't even delve in a little bit. Like, especially
Right.
now, we got the internet. You could search up all this interesting stuff from all different sources and amazing stuff, but they don't have any desire. But you know what? Like, why that is they have no pride. They have no knowledge of their actual Jewish heritage and stuff like that. You know what I mean? They're
And it's
just
actually, and it's also accepting the status quo. Like, for example, okay, I'll Oslo terrorist accords. Okay, so obviously Rabin was pressured to sign by Clinton, who was an anti-Semite. And to this day, like I remember I stopped donating to JNF because they had not one, but two events with Dennis Ross, the Jew who helped perpetuate the anti-Semitic Oslo Accords that killed thousands of Jews through terrorist murders. That did not happen before. So I stood on principle. Like, what is JNF doing? They say that they're Zionists, and I know they are, but like have some integrity. So,
exactly.
so it's also, and like I'll get the same remarks back. It's status quo. It says you can change the status quo. Like all Bibi has to do, like it's not a conflict. By the way, I know you don't use that term, but a lot of Jews do. And I always push back and I said, how is it a conflict? It's not two morally equal
Yep.
entities fighting over a legitimate claim that both sides have. That's a conflict. Like a conflict, for example, if the US and Canada were fighting over a river, who owns which river, right? And like, we have claim to it, they've claimed to it, and now we want more of the river. Okay, that's a conflict. What it has been in Israel, it has been a war on Jews for the past 100+ years, since the British occupiers fomented every single one of the Arab massacres and riots against Jews. So, for example, so all of this would need for Israel to be safe for the rest of time is for Bibi to have fully sieged Gaza, starve out the Arab occupiers. Who cares what the rest of the world thinks? When the Allies did that to German cities, when we did much worse to Japan, it was understood it's a war. That was the only way wars were going to be stopped. You do everything, even collateral damage, to make sure this never happens again, right? So, sure, we would be hated maybe for another 5 years, but we're already hated. So, might as well be hated and be safe. So, starve out the Arab, which, by the way, Gallant told Bibi to do on October 8th. He said, fully siege Gaza. Okay, so that would have worked. That would have brought home all our hostages much, much sooner than they are suffering still now, what, like 600+ days later. Then in Judea and Samaria, deport the Arab occupiers that came in from Jordan, who originally were Arab occupiers from 25 different Muslim countries to Israel, who only fled to Jordan to help Arab armies kill Jews faster in 47, 48. Then some of them were resettled to Judea and Samaria during the illegal Jordanian occupation. Now, there are genetic Jew Arabs who were genetic Jews and then accepted forceful conversion to Islam in the 11th century. Sure. So Israel already knows the clans that are genetic Jews. So keep them. They have a claim to the land. But then the 70% who are not genetic Jews, send them back and make sure that the ones who remain, put them under martial law for 5 years. They can't vote for 5 years. They have to make sure, you're not enacting any violence. That's the solution for Jews to live
Well, that's the
peacefully.
way Meir Kahane wanted it. Was
Right,
okay,
right.
have him leave, and like the ones, even when he's like softened his stat or his idea a tiny bit right before he was murdered. Okay, maybe if there's a good one, they have to be second class citizens. They just can't have the right to vote. You know what I mean? Now that's a little bit more extreme than what you're
Yeah.
saying, but
Well,
it's a similar idea. Do you know what I'm
yeah.
saying? And look, as JDL, as the revival of JDL, we realize there's a lot of Druze who are in the military, a lot of Arabs who do a lot of great things for Israel, and we're not looking to get rid of everybody, but we really
No,
need to keep that country safe. And those who are really actual, criminals and terrorists and all that stuff, they got to go. I mean, it's just common sense that eventually they're going to outvote us. That's one of the things that Mayor kind of constantly spoke about was they're going to keep having babies and babies, and they're doing that in every other country right now. Great Britain here, their birth rate outnumbers every other group. You know what I
So,
mean? They just
fun fact, in Israel, it's the opposite. So, as
really
soon as Israel was pushing for education for women, the birth rates were reversed. So, the Arab women were having fewer babies, even in Judea and Samaria, and
here.
the Jewish birth rate increased. So now, like in America, if you're like a Jewish family, on average, you're having 1.2 children. In Israel, even the secular Jews on average are having 3 kids. And then, of course, it moves up the ranks, right? So, like 3 kids, and then the Hasidic are having 8 to 10 children. So it's not that, it's just like knowing what to like to take back your land. And we don't even have 100% of the Judean homeland that's free, only 22%. So now what's happening is that, because Trump, and I'm a Trump supporter, but not on all of his foreign policies, he scooped in. He obviously did what he had to do in Iran with the attack, which was needed. But then mid attack of Israel on Iran, he stopped it, right? He's like, okay, like no more. And now Bibi is so desperate for a deal with the Saudis, which is needless because they already have a good working relationship. Gaza, Jewish Gaza, is on its way to becoming a de facto two-state solution, which Rabbi Kahane would have been, he's probably rolling in his grave looking at all of this transpiring. So again, it's, so when I look at Kahane's history, he studied the history, like you said, and he wasn't in Israel machine gunning the Arabs and killing. Of course not. He said, okay, where are the Jews being murdered? We need to show force.
Yep.
Force, and that's the thing. And also, like in the Middle East, as you know, but a lot of people don't apparently, force and strength is the only thing that's respected. And that's
Exactly.
why JDL is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you even said that story where they would hear that Rabbi Kahane or, Meir Kahane was coming and they wouldn't do anything. They would be all quiet. They wouldn't mess about. And all it took was them knowing how strong and no nonsense he was. And going back to what you were saying about Bibi and all that, like, just get it over with. We already know what the rest of the world is going to say. Stop caring about what they say. They say the same stuff every time, no matter if we do anything good. Look, they're the most moral army in the world. They still talk all this stuff. Just get the job done. Save Jews. Don't worry about America. Look, I love America. I'm 100% pro-America and all that stuff. But listen, Israel needs to do what's right for itself, just like America and
America does too, right? And that's the thing, like I completely understand why they're Republican, MAGA Republicans who are like America first, America first. Do I agree with everything they're saying? No, but I get it because I'm an American, right? But Israel needs to have an Israel first also, and not think, and by the way, there is like I met with Knesset members at an event in New York years ago, like 8 years ago, and they said the elephant in the room is that we don't want American military aid because it handcuffs us. They like why they're not allies. We're actually like there's no ally agreement between America and Israel. And the reason why, because they said we have sometimes counter um, initiatives, counter interests. Like, for example, they said we sell weapons to countries that America would never agree to.
Yep.
Because America can do what it needs. Well, I mean, we're the strongest country in the world. We are the superpower of superpowers right now. But look at what Israel did in the last war against Iran. It acted like a superpower. And by the way, they have the technology to create their own B-2 bombers. They do, but they're constantly being handcuffed. And then they suffer because of the military aid. You know how it works, right? The military aid, every cent has to be spent on our technology. We don't give them, for the most part, brand new weapons. It's usually older models, gets retrofitted and upgraded by the IDF. And then that R&D gets back to the US free of charge. Plus all the top-notch intelligence, plus it's not having boots on the ground anywhere.
Then they test aircrafts in battle because America's not always testing these things in warfare and stuff. So they're doing testing for them and all that stuff. No, like you said, and actually this is perfect because I just read Rabbi Kahane's Parsha for this week, and it's titled "Seek No Allies." Sometimes Israel needs to be alone and fight for itself. And I forget the quote, but I know there's a quote where like in the Torah where they talk about like Israel being alone. Sometimes Israel's going to be alone, and there's stories about where there were I think it was the Maccabees. There was only like how many 300 something like that 400 some like few hundred
originally, but then it grew exponentially.
And so look how much like they still stood up. We got to really stop being handcuffed by the all these weapons and stuff. I wish Israel would start. Now I know it has its like own military and kind of industrial
It's called
complex
the
thing.
I. Yeah, it's called the IWI.
Okay, they need to ramp it up 100 times that.
But that's the thing. So they did, but then because of the partnership, they didn't have a chance to expand. So now there's a growing call to end military aid. And even to his credit, credit where credit is due, even Netanyahu during the chaos of the Iran war, remember like Trump was like deciding, I don't know. I mean, I know there's a lot of politicking going on and he was trying to confuse Iran. But he even said, he's like, okay, like we need to stand on our own militarily. And it's true. Like they're the ones who, created a lot of great weapons over the years. Like the Tavor gun is an Israeli invention, the Uzi way before then. And if you look back after the liberation of Israel, when Israel had no allies or no friends at all, that's when the IDF did its greatest job. Like the War of 48,
Yep.
what? Like who would have thought that they'd be back six armies? The War of
They were their
67.
own weapons, all in underground
Yeah.
facilities too. It wasn't
And
like these massive factories. They were underground facilities, like a little cave or a little,
right.
hole dug into the ground, concrete. And they were building them themselves. We could still do that way better nowadays.
Of
And
course. Or
talking
67.
research and development and weapons. Look at the Iron Dome. Now America wants what are they going to call it? American Dome, Golden Dome, something like
Golden
that.
Dome.
It's like the same. Look, Israel built it. Now we get it. Now that's a great thing. But Israel, I really believe that Israel doesn't need America. You know what I mean?
Now, and do you remember in 67, the War of 67, Israel almost went and captured Cairo,
Yeah. Yep.
almost was able to capture Damascus if it kept
Yep.
going. It's like just like imagine it didn't have, like you said, none of the technology, didn't have drones back then, had a very fledgling IAF. It's sheer strength because they knew that we have no other homelands, right? Like, and that's why, like, like if you look at the Ukraine Russia war, I mean, it's a whole other topic. I also have
Yeah.
views on that based on history, actual history, and who's right, who's wrong. You can probably surmise who I think is wrong, who I think is right. But Putin is sending out basically mercenaries. A lot of them, they're in Siberia, they're these ethnic groups. So to them, like, yes, like they're indigenous to Russia, but they don't consider themselves like mother Russians. So they're not
Yeah.
fighting as hard as a lot of the Ukrainians who I'll I'll skip the history part of this, who consider themselves, I'll leave it at that, to be Ukrainians, right? Even though there's different ethnicities there. So that's how Jews were fighting in 48 and 67. They're like, well, okay, we're Judeans. We have no other homeland. This is literally our homeland. And the Jordanians who are attacking and the Egyptians and this and that, they were just career soldiers that also played a big role into that. So, and that's the thing, like, we just need Jews. And I'm so glad that GDL has been resurrected because I was looking for a GDL. Like, I didn't even know like anything about you or this group or anything. I remember in 2021, during the previous Hamas war, I lived by Columbus Circle. And I don't know if you're familiar with Columbus Circle. It's, yeah. Okay. So, like there's protests and gatherings sometimes. I saw a car parade for Hamas. They're waving the Hamas flag, they're waving the flag of terrorism,
Yeah.
which people call the Palestinian flag. The Palestinian flag is Israeli flag. And they're having a freaking police escort. And I walked to one of the police women and I said, do you know what you're defending here? And she said, it's not my job to analyze. I just do what I'm told. And
They don't
that
care.
they don't care. But that was the start. So that was 2021 here. And then of course, like, the assaults on Jews were multiplying. And then now, and after the genocide, I was thinking like, where are the Jewish patrol groups? Because I'm not seeing anything, here.
Yep.
And of course there's Shamrim in Brooklyn, and I know they're doing a great job. But
They can only do so much. They can
yeah,
only do so much. You know what I mean? They have their hands tied too in a way. You know what I
right.
mean?
So
So
that's the thing. So like what made or like are you seeing a lot more interest in these like pro patrol groups, like to make presence known that like we're here to protect Jews
Yeah.
against, yeah.
Yeah, we've been actually getting a lot of attention. It's been really great. Like we've been growing a lot. At least have so we have like an interview process. We do
Mhm.
about at least 4 or 5 interviews a week to have get members in, make sure they align with us, and we're going to click and all that stuff. And there's been a lot of interest. And one of the things we're trying to get together, even for people who aren't members, but for just everybody, self defense classes, firearms classes, we do volunteer work. We don't just combat anti-Semitism. That is
Mhm.
a huge portion of what we do.
Right.
The patrols, we offer like groups like Beitar Security, Beitar USA. If they have an event, kind of like we met at,
Right.
we've told them, look, if you have another event, we'll come and work security for you. We you know we're really trying to really pump up and have more local groups so we can do more patrols, do more things on the local level, which is starting to happen now. Like when we get together now, we'll do a patrol. We do random patrols. We don't say a time, place, or anything like that. We just go,
Okay.
and
So
we
like
see what
I as a Jew, I'm not gonna get like an alert, right?
yeah,
Like
nah,
JDL in your area.
yeah, no, yeah. You
Okay.
probably won't know it's us because we're not going to be wearing BDL shirts and all that stuff. We want to see what's really going on. You know what I mean? And
That's true. So it's like more. So
yeah,
has your group been able to infiltrate into the Mamdani camp at all?
um, we're trying. We're really
Okay.
trying to get people who are willing to do stuff like that.
Like willing to lie and say like, oh yeah, like I'm pro, like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Okay.
I'm okay. I would do it, but I'm also now the face of
Right.
JDL, and so I would
It's a
do
little bit harder.
and some of the members we have, or the way we've been getting have careers, have
Right.
family, and that might be a little bit of a risk for them. But we're really looking for a lot of like we're looking to recruit college kids, people who are smart with computers, people who know the lingo, have been
Mhm.
in that environment, and can really. They don't need to actually do anything but get into one of these groups, messaging chats and stuff like that, so we can know what they're talking about, things like that. That's something we're developing. We have an intelligence unit that we keeps eyes on things and stuff like that. So we're looking to build that up. And
May I make a suggestion? I don't know if it's completely again like off base or not, but I was really concerned during all of the terrorist encampments across, and it wasn't just Columbia. Columbia is always shown, but it was NYU, it was Hunter, it was Merriman, it was across the board, the new school. Are college kids reaching out to GDL for physical protection at all?
no, but I think part of that is they have no idea who JDL is.
Hmm. Okay.
People like find us. Some people find us on the internet. A lot of people who've been joining have been older, my age, in the 40s,
Right.
50s, that age, because they, we knew about JDL, we knew about Meir Kahane.
Right.
But this coming September, we're going to be putting a major focus on college campuses, flyering, being out there, being visible, because that's the demographic we want to target really, and get them involved. You know what I
And
mean?
would you be offering, let's say, again, just off the top of my head, like, would you be offering protection? Like, let's say someone has already been assaulted or their group is constantly like under threat and they're scared, especially like at night to like, walk. I'm just thinking I went to Columbia for grad school, like to walk from 116 to their apartment, like they're being followed, let's say, by pro-terrorists. Is that something that would be available to
Yeah,
Jews?
we're hoping to actually build groups on campuses.
Okay.
They don't need totally public, but groups of Jewish, people who are going there who can support each other. And then if something actually, they need support, they can call us in, and we
Mm.
would show up and actually, be able to really do something and stuff like that. Hopefully, as we grow, we'll have people specifically in those areas who have joined who can do stuff like that,
Mhm.
and kind of on call and do things like that. We would like to eventually set up like a hotline. Somebody actually does need some help and emergency assistance, or something like maybe something that the police won't really handle, or things like that. We can take over. You know what I mean? So
Or even I'm thinking like political clubs. Like I'm part of the Metropolitan Republican Club, and we have had so much violence since 2016, like our windows being smashed in, and we can't have police there all the time, or not every time we have an event. And sometimes, like you said, like police operate under such, pun intended, under their own set of handcuffs, right? Like we
yeah,
can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do that. So I'm just thinking like another outlet is not even for Jews, but for Republican clubs, in New York who do need protection as well.
What
My
I think we'll do eventually is maybe have like a separate non-JDL security apparatus, maybe even like a
That's fair.
company that can actually do Jewish events, Republican events, things like that. You know what I mean?
Hindu events.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
the whole non, you know.
And that would actually be a great revenue making model, right? Like you can make money off of that, and then like it goes back into training. So my follow-up question is, we were talking about ADL and a lot of the liberal groups who, from when even Kahane was alive, was going after GDL and groups like GDL. Like I know Bitar has been getting dragged through the mud by liberal organizations, calling them terrorists, calling them extremists. Now, the opposite. Has any Jewish organization, not ADL or the like, reached out to you to try to work together or to maybe like make amends?
None,
Hmm.
not no
Okay.
one. Now I've been reaching out to some Jewish organizations myself to like try and build a contact, show them Reem, stuff like that. Never got a response. I just said, look, we want someone to contact. We got
Right.
people in the area. If we get information, intelligence, we want to pass it on to you. Nothing crazy, you know what I mean? We're like, explaining to them we're a different organization. We follow different tactics. You know what I'm saying? They just don't seem to want to have anything to do with us. I think as we, grow, as people start seeing us more out there, seeing our videos, seeing us in action, I hope things will happen. I don't really expect it to come from groups like JD or ADL and
Yeah.
the other one and stuff. They're never gonna try and apologize or anything. They're too brainwashed and set in their stone, and about us. But um,
ADL has always been problematic. I remember joining ADL because, again, I didn't know better. I moved to New York. I had no Jewish friends, really ironic since New York is obviously a major Jewish center, but it just wasn't on my forefront. Most of my friends in college were non-Jews. So anyway, so I'm like, okay, maybe start having some Jewish friends. Let's see what's around. So I joined APAC, which not pro-Israel. We can get into like all of that another time. And I joined ADL when it was under Foxman, Abraham Foxman. So before Greenblatt, it
yeah,
was just as dysfunctional and just as liberal. So it's not, I mean, obviously Greenblatt like made it even more so, but I think these organizations are just rooted in the antithesis of Judean values. And that's the thing. Like as soon as like Jews know again, and I emphasize this through my own Zionism work, like know who you are before you can A, complain about anti-Semitism because you're contributing to anti-Semitism, and B, before you can even talk about Israel and Jewish history because you don't know it. And then, like I did for 20 years, aid and abet in anti-Semitic lies. Like I remember being interviewed on a TV segment for GBS, and the interviewer asked me, he's like, "Oh, so I never verbalized it." And he said, "Oh, so for those 20 years, weren't you contributing to anti-Semitism?" And I did this aha movement on live TV. And I said, yes, I was anti-Semitic for 20 years. Like it never dawned on me that A plus B equals C, right? And that's
yeah.
what's going on in the larger Jewish space too. So if there's anything I can do to help the organization, because it's not only needed in immediate circumstances, but it's a tie to Judean history, which is so important. So thank you so
100%.
much for your hard work, for taking on this Herculean task, of course. And I just wish JDL all the success and may it grow and grow and grow. Of
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate that.
course. Of course. And then, of course, like any other facts about Rabbi Kahana or GDL that we didn't get to, I'm happy to add, or any links, I'm happy to add in the description on YouTube when it gets posted.
Cool, fantastic. I'll send them to you like right after this and stuff. So
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. And I look forward, I hope I'm on your mailing list. So I look forward to next
yeah, well, as you
events
want,
we have.
I'll add your email to it today.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for
We'll
your
be in
time. Have a great
touch.
night.
You
Bye.
too. Take care. Have a good
Bye.
one.